now I would like to introduce Cédric, the Minister of Digital Transformation, that joined me on stage to talk about the French tech ecosystem and the supportive public policies. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Because this year was so specific, can you tell us about the public policy that have been implemented to support the French tech ecosystem during the pandemic?
Yes, first I want to thank both Singapore and the Switch Fintech Festival for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning or maybe this afternoon in Singapore. Well, as you know, France has always been supporting its startup ecosystem. And we've had two times during the pandemics. The first one is we tried to absorb the impact of the crisis because to some extent we were forced to go into lockdown overnight. So it was a huge difficulty for the economy, especially for the startups. So we tried to help them in terms of cash, in terms of handling unemployment problems and so on and so on, be it from an equity or a financing point of view. So that was the first part of the plan. And then, as many other countries, there is a question on how to leverage on the crisis and to build the future of the ecosystems, of the tech ecosystems. So as many other countries, but especially, but maybe with a specific focus on tech in France, when we designed our stimulus package in order to recover from the crisis, we decided that to some extent tech would be very important within that stimulus package, both from an overall point of view, bringing more fuel within the ecosystem, but also from a vertical point of view. What we've seen in the past is that the big techs, for instance, have built their power on the consequences of the last crisis in 2008. And so we decided that France would invest, for instance, in quantum computing, in AI, in cybersecurity, in biotech, and so on, in order to build the French economy of the future, and obviously the French tech ecosystem is a key pillar of that strategy.
So you have been active and strongly supportive to the fast-growing fintech ecosystem scene. But as the fintech ecosystem goes stronger, can you tell us about the dynamisms in the tech ecosystem itself, how it's structured with the French tech and the fundraising and its resilience?
Yeah, since the beginning, President Macron has been laying a great emphasis into developing the French tech, the French startup ecosystem. And so that's one of the reasons why we undertook a lot of reforms at the beginning of the mandate. I'm thinking of labor market reforms, of reform on taxation, on capital gains, on vocational training, and so on and so on. And we are gaining a lot of success, as we saw in the figures that were presented a few minutes ago. For instance, if we take the amount of money that has been raised by the French startups over the last year, we doubled the amount of money in 2 years, and we might be in 2020 for the first time in history outperforming the Germans in terms of amount of money that is raised by our startups. So the pace that is unfolding is quite fast. But we want to accelerate because we know that Europe is still lagging behind if we compare it to China or the US, so we will continue to push stronger on that.
Okay, thank you. And how do you see the recovery or the acceleration in the tech sector in France? I mean, after the pandemic, will there be fundamental changes or some specific sectors that are more successful and you want to bet on it?
Well, I'm not sure this is a huge transformation. I think this is an acceleration of underlying trends that were already at stakes or unfolding before the crisis. But the crisis is helping us gain time, save time. And so that's why I would not speak about a recovery. I think that this is a quicker expansion of the ecosystem. And I think that the French startups will raise more money in 2020 than they did in 2019. So that's embodying the fact that we are accelerating. And as Winston Churchill himself said it, we are not wasting the crisis. And I think that there will be an overall expansion. But one thing that is really interesting is that the legacy economy is now digitalizing. We were a little bit lagging behind in France if you compare us with other European states. But legacy businesses such as small shops and so on are forced to digitalize due to the confinement period. So what's interesting is that digitalization is gaining pace, obviously in the startup, in the pure players, but this is all the more true in the legacy economy.
And regarding the fintech ecosystem more specifically?
Well, what's interesting, and we saw it on the figures that on the charts, is that the fintech ecosystem is developing at the same pace than the rest of the ecosystem, which means quite fast. We saw a few rounds over the past 2 years with Conto, Alan, Lydia, and so on that we had never seen beforehand in France. So this is really interesting. I think that what's interesting, and that was embodied by the intervention of François Villeroy-de-Galhau, the central bank governors, is that if you want to develop a fintech ecosystem, you should rely on a conversation between the regulator, the state, and the entrepreneurs, because trust is key in that ecosystem. And I remember that I had 2 months ago a dinner with François Villeroy, the regulator, and a few entrepreneurs in order to discuss how we can design regulation to preserve the reputation of the French place, but also help steer up innovation. And I think that we can rely on a financial place that is quite well known all over the world in France, and we have to transform that reputation, to transform our know-how into innovation.
So now the French tech and especially fintech has grown stronger and is ready to bloom internationally, because I think we can agree today that international development is a key driver. So is it the reason why La French Tech is so interested to develop important and consistent relationship with Asia and even more with Singapore?
Yeah, obviously. I think that basically, a thing that we are trying to build here is an international hub. We want to be leading the way in Europe in terms of startups and in terms of innovation. And we all know that if you want to build something big, you have to rely on something international. So that's why the way we are building it is we want all the best entrepreneurs, the best researchers, and the best companies to come here. And we know that we have to do it in cooperation with a lot of countries, and especially countries such as Singapore. We all see that there are 2 major players as far as tech is concerned, which are China and the US, and the other countries are struggling in order to develop their own ecosystem. So we share common interest with Singapore, and I had a very interesting discussion with Mr. Ambassador and also the Minister S. Iswaran a few days ago. We had also a discussion on, for instance, in the Global Partnership of AI Forum, which is a global forum for regulating AI. And I think that we have to build bridges between culture and between continents, especially Asia, which is to some extent leading the way in terms of innovation, in order to strengthen our 2 ecosystems.
Where do you think will be the priorities in the newly collaboration?
Well, I think that there are a few things that are quite interesting. The financial sector is obviously interesting, considering the weight of the 2 financial places that are Singapore and Paris. There are also areas that we discussed a few days ago, for instance, which is the way to handle the pandemics with technology. We know that Singapore was the first country, for instance, to deploy a contact tracing app, and the feedbacks that we had were very, very interesting. And so I think there are a few verticals like that we can build cooperation on. And I also want to mention the GPI that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. I mean, we all know that technology is developing. We all know that we have to invest in technology and go faster. But there are also questions among the population about the impact of technology in our day-to-day life. And there is, to some extent, a doubt on technology. So we have to ensure our people that technology is built and is developed on top of the core values that we've all been sharing over the past centuries. And this is something that democracies such as Singapore and France, but also other countries such as Canada or the European Union, obviously, can work together on. Because there is an American model, there is a Chinese model, and we think that there could be a third way that we could build with, to some extent, non-aligned states.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister, for sharing us those insights on your strong interest on cooperation and collaboration with Asia and especially with Singapore. Do you have anything to add, a special message, for instance, for all the people from Singapore who are looking at the session now?
Yeah, well, we are today in the old building of the French stock marketplace, talking about technology. This is definitely what we want to do in France. We have a huge and a very interesting history about engineering, research, and building our prosperity on top of that research and technology. And we want to build the next stage of that history in France, investing in startups, investing in technology, investing in entrepreneurs. And we want to do it from an international point of view. So I would be really happy first to come to Singapore in the coming months, if the pandemic allows me to do so, but also to welcome all the Singaporean entrepreneurs and investors so that we can build bridges between the two countries.
Thank you very much. And we'll be very happy to welcome the fintechs from Singapore here in La Place Fintech in the Palace.
Thanks a lot.